Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Where is our country going to be morally, socially, and everything else in 20 years? Because even if you say everybody you brought in were angels, millions of people, and they're all just perfect people, they don't know the Constitution and they're not used to fighting for their rights. And so they're going to side with the state every time against the people that want to have rights.
Yeah, you're it's hard not to just get depressed, man. It's hard not to just say, the problem is just so big. And honestly, I think this is part of like George Soros and his ilk. I think this is part of what their plan is just, it's Alinsky 101, just overwhelm the system. And so I think a lot of politicians, frankly, are cowards. And, once they actually get into power, the one thing that they care about is staying in power. And part of that, by staying in power is not making waves and just kind of going along with the flow. Well, this flow is, you know what? I think they believe if they're the on the bow of the, or not the bow, but the stern, I guess. What's the back of a ship?
The bow.
Anyway.
Oh my God. Why can't I remember? James O'Keefe's going to be mad. I go say it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if they're on the very,
it's a little early
if the ship's going, us landlocked people, army guys, we don't know what the thing is called.
We got 100 people yelling at the screen right now. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like all the Navy guys that are listening right now, they're just screaming at us. But
right.
Whoever it is, these guys believe that as long as they're the last ones, as the ship's going down, as the Titanic is sinking, if they're on the very back of the ship and they're the last ones into the water, then, that's okay. That's a win for them. But what they don't realize is the whole ship is going down, and eventually you're going to be in the water right next to everybody else. And that's, I actually did a series a number of years ago when I first started the podcast. I called it Evil, the Beast, and the Buffet. And the analogy is evil kind of allows the beast to grow, and the beast eventually gets into the buffet, and basically we are the buffet. And a lot of these politicians believe that just because they're at the end of the buffet and they're the last ones to be eaten, that, they're safe, and they're not. And eventually the whole system will collapse. And then, I know this is, for a lot of people, this may just sound like conspiracy theories, and it may just sound like, the United States, because we haven't had a war here since the 1860s, that so many people, it's just incomprehensible that we could actually have that kind of a chaos here in the United States. It's just hard for them to comprehend. And I understand that. The United States is the greatest social experiment that has ever happened in the history of mankind. And because of that, because of how amazing this country is, and our founding fathers, and the Constitution, and the representative republic that we have, all of that has contributed to being an absolute amazing place to live over the last 150 years, basically. And we've had peace and prosperity that no other people in the entire world, in the history of the world, has ever been able to experience. And so for many of our citizens, and many, many people that have lived and are living here in the United States, we just can't comprehend of what we're looking at. And yet, literally, we've become a powder keg. And the only thing that hasn't happened is somebody's lit the spark. And you tell me, Taylor, I think President Trump coming into office in 2 days is literally 3 days, is literally going to be the spark. And I think the potential for chaos is just absolutely off the charts. I don't think we've ever seen anything even remotely close to this.
How many assassinations have we seen on a political, on a presidential candidate in the last, well, I guess you go back too far, there actually has been a few, but what I'm getting at is, yes, we've already had, assassination attempts. It's been crazier than ever before. And yes, it's going to be a pretty interesting 4 years. But we have to remember, I don't think you can ever completely clean out the deep state and the bureaucracy. There's just too much of it. But you can make these basically these fail safes and make certain laws and executive orders to kind of prevent that. But the number one thing that needs to happen if you ever want change, doesn't matter who's president, doesn't matter any of that, you have to change the university system. Everybody who goes to the university, even if they're conservative, comes out at least a little bit Marxist. Um, Most of the people that I know that go into the university system never seem to leave. They're still taking classes 28, 30 years old. And then they get a job as an educator and they never leave this bubble that has been just purely a Marxist, think tank. And it's to the point where they don't even make their own curriculum anymore. The colleges don't make their own curriculum. They ask the students to make the curriculum. They pick the one they like the most, and then that becomes the new curriculum for, to teach them. And it's not based on anything. There's no checks and balances. And if you want somebody hired for a company that knows how to, code, who knows how to do this and that or edit, they had to go to college, right? You're looking at college, college experience on the resume. They're going to have Marxism in them. And you're going to see things like what happened to James O'Keefe. His whole company was taken from him because a bunch of people said, well, you get to do all the fun stuff and we want all the money, you know, but he's the guy who made all the money. He's the one who baked the bread. If we don't change that, nothing will change.
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest problems with our education system, I think you're spot on there, but just people in general, we need to understand that talking is not productivity. And it's interesting between social media and, influencers and the media, the mainstream media, all they do is talk. And yet a lot of them are paid millions of dollars a year to do that. But that's not actually being productive. Being productive means that you are actually taking something like guys on an assembly line, creating a car. You're actually creating something. You're moving one object in a way and changing it to a way to make it more valuable. Well, granted, we're in the information age, and I understand that information is valuable, but you also have to have the basic necessities. Actually building a building. The guys that go in and actually build something, that is productivity. And you can't have a society that's just based on information. Like it or not, we have to eat, we have to live somewhere. We have to drive roads. We have to actually move places. There's still a physical aspect of people that no matter what we do, no matter how smart we think we are, those things still have to happen. And that's what I was talking about back, when we first got started here. People don't understand what it actually means to be productive anymore. And a lot of that is from the university system. They reward people for getting these degrees that are completely worthless. And then these people come out into the real world. They get out of the university system and they just can't comprehend that somebody won't pay them $200,000 a year for, basically having a underwater basket weaving type of a degree or, anyway, some of these degrees that people are coming out with are completely
Gender studies, all the equity studies,
gender
that kind of
studies.
stuff.
It's like
A lot of them are actually choosing their own degree and making up it as they go along. And the college is like, sure, you paid us, we'll sign that paper. So yeah, it's a joke.
yeah, and yet they're coming out hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and then they can't find a job that pays them more than 30 or 40,000 a year, and they realize, oh, you know what? people aren't just going to give me money anymore. And it's sad just watching this mentality, and a lot of these people that are like, oh yeah, we need the federal government to bail us out and pay off our student loans. Say, well, no, you don't. You signed your name on the line, you pay it back. And to me, it's like, how do we, it's frustrating. It's sad. And I just look at this. Okay. So here's the problem. We now have an entire crop, an entire generation of completely illiterate and just idiots coming out of the university system right now. What do we do in order to fix that?
I think it's one of those things where you just have to be slapped in the face by reality. Everybody has their moment where they just kind of wake up, if they do wake up. You talk to some of the former Soviet Union defectors, they say that once a human being is completely demoralized, there's no taking them back. So hopefully, and here's the thing we need to remember: these are our countrymen, our fellow countrymen. We can't give them sympathy in the way, oh, okay, you can do this and that, because it's giving a mouse a cookie. You give them an inch, they'll take a mile. That's how these Marxists work, to the point where they're so narcissistic and they're so self-centered that whatever they say is the truth, and everybody else, that's just is BS. So there has to be, at some point, we have to give some of these people a chance. There's some that I think need to be exiled or taken out of the United States altogether for treason. But we have to find some way. We can't just say screw all you kids that are woke and everything else. We also, what we have to do is we have to realize that it wasn't these kids that brainwashed themselves. It was the generation before that became professors. I think everybody needs to take a personal responsibility as a parent to really get involved in what their kid's doing, what they're watching. What are they really watching on the tablet? What's next on the YouTube playlist? What are they being told? And not everybody is going to be able to pick up on the Marxist slang, on those kind of things. They're just too busy, or they don't have the ear for it. So I think family dinners need to come back. The nuclear family needs to be, that's something that America pretty much created. And I think that's something that needs to be centerpiece. We need to get rid of the screens for little kids. What they're doing at every level is dumbing us down. The biggest thing they're doing to the Marxists, to the people that get brainwashed, is you're not allowed to notice patterns. What does a good journalist do? Notice patterns. You start noticing patterns based on nationality, this, that, or the other, and now you're a racist. What's the worst thing you can be in the woke world? A racist. After someone's been deemed a racist, valid or not, they are no longer a human being. They can be killed, they can be tortured, they can be made fun of, bullied, and it's absolutely disgusting. So, there's a lot going on, but I think at the same time that we're combating it, we also need to think long term into the future. If we're just reactionary, we're going to be playing this game forever. We're going to be plugging holes in the dam all day long. We don't change the university system and really go to our kids and say, hey, what's going on? What's wrong? I'm sorry that society has failed you, because society has failed them. Everything that they've been taught is a lie. They were lied to by everybody just to make their day easier. Take this pill. I was a kid in the 90s, the whole Ritalin epidemic, all that. I went through that. And I saw how basically your personality, you as an individual, doesn't matter anymore. You're just another number in a book for a school. Again, that's Marxism. That's more of a leftist thought of groups of people versus the individual. So if we really get back, if you read the Constitution, really get back to what the founding fathers were talking about your individual rights, that you are an individual. The government should be there to augment your life, not to, disturb or disrupt and overregulate. I think people have been coddled for so long. And like you were saying earlier, a lot of Americans have never had to deal with serious consequence. You do this and that happens. I mean, they just really haven't they haven't lived in a place where if you don't go and get fresh water today, you're going to have no water to drink. Or if you don't go out and hunt a buffalo, there's going to be no food for anybody. And to hunt a buffalo, you have to put your life on the line. That's not going to HEB and picking up ground beef. So I think people have lost a lot of their primal drives, which, connects you to nature, that we're not all the most important thing in the world, that there is a life cycle. We live and we die, and it goes on, so on and so forth. And that kind of brings in that whole, what do they call it? Transhumanism, The elitists want to live forever. They want to upload their consciousness to a hard drive and live forever. That sounds pretty bleak and disgusting to me, to be that self-centered. But that is what they're trying to cultivate. They're trying to tell everybody that's the way to be. Be a robot on a hard drive somewhere forever, I guess controlling. What are you doing? Controlling people, telling people what to do? I mean, well, Marxism's turned everything on its head, so we need to turn it back right again. But that's the big thing. The globalists may have knocked the world off of balance, but it doesn't mean they're the one that's going to put it back right again. We can do it.
Yeah. Amen to all of that. It's interesting, folks. I know that a lot of you are listening to this and you're saying, man, is this a political show or is this a crime show? And the whole reason that we're having this discussion here is, just like there's a lot of people that commit crimes, especially in the big cities and things like that, because they don't have opportunities. They don't have, or they're not willing to actually go out and take advantage of opportunities that might be there. But it all boils down to personal responsibility. So you are responsible. Nobody cares. Nobody gives a crap about your life more than you do. And if you're not willing to actually go out and work and take responsibility for yourself and actually be productive, you have to personally be productive. You have to go hit the gym. If you want to be in good shape, you have to hit the gym. You have to eat right. Nobody can do it for you. And ultimately, it's the same mentality that we all have to have. We all have to start looking in the mirror and saying, okay, am I being productive? Yes. Or nobody's being as productive as they could be. But that's where it starts. Say, am I taking responsibility for myself? And if you're not, then you have to do that. And frankly, I think society we all have to look at each other and say, okay, as a collective, the first thing we have to do is look in the mirror and say, I need to do my share. I need to take responsibility for myself and take responsibility for my own family. And then I can contribute to society. And, otherwise everything falls apart. And none of us want that, because then we're all just like, it's every man for himself. And in fact, I heard an interview of a guy that was a former CIA officer, and he actually talked about, if society falls apart, most of the guys that know really what they're doing, they only have like a couple of days worth of supplies on hand, because from then they become like nomads and they start going from place to place and just collecting resources as they need them. I'm like, imagine 350 million of us doing that. I mean, that is chaos in the highest form, and none of us want that. And so the only way to solve this is for people to actually start taking responsibility for themselves, and most importantly, demanding that other people take responsibilities for themselves as well in everything that they do. Say, look, if you have a worthless degree from the university, that's on you. And most importantly, from that point forward, you need to figure out what you're going to do, because basically you need to start over. Your education is worthless. You need to start re-educating yourself and actually learning how life really works. And otherwise, that's when when they start taking shortcuts, that's literally when they start moving into crime, because then they start looking at other people and saying, well, Taylor has more than what Jared does. Therefore, Jared is justified in taking stuff from Taylor. And sorry, that's crime. And that's the one thing that this show is all about, is identifying that and then identifying the problem and saying, hey, this is how we solve this. And for the people that just can't get it into their heads that taking responsibility for themselves is critically important, then that's when you say, well, we're going to put you in jail then. So that's just how our system works. You have to be responsible for yourself. And if you can't, then we just can't allow you to run free. So that's the basics of it. And I don't know. Taylor, am I just kind of on a soapbox? Does this make sense?
No, it makes sense. Something I wanted to bring up from earlier too is what you're talking about. Like referring to like people not really getting involved and not producing anything, just thoughts and words and everything. Um, when, you know, the Haitians were eating cats and dogs in the Midwest, what happened? People made memes and laughed about it. Haha, our country's being invaded and our beloved pets are being eaten by some foreign guy who doesn't speak English. Ha ha ha, this is funny. No, it's not funny. This is the bread and circus that the Romans were talking about. Um, that basically we have taken to entertainment and, you know, these little political battles. That's the sandbox the globalists are allowing you to play in. They're allowing, you know, they allow BLM to riot. They allow, you know, people to get, you know, there's discourse. There's, you know, like a bunch of, I think Proud Boys and Antifa got into it in Portland years back. They allow that. They, you know what I mean? That's the sandbox you're allowed in. You got to think outside the box, and you got to do things that actually make a difference. I started a group called Citizens Against Sexualization of Children to combat South Texas Equality Project, and Lupe's also involved with them, doing kids drag shows down in the Rio Grande Valley. And you know, they're backed by ACLU, all the usual suspects. So you have to get involved somehow. And if you don't know politics, you don't know that kind of stuff, support somebody who does. And more than anything, make your own decision. Live and die by your own accord. Even if it's a stupid decision, you made it, not somebody else. So I think people need to start looking at the gilded cage around them. That's basically, there is the matrix. The matrix is right in front of us. It's the phone. It's the, you know, the white picket fence and 2-car garage and all that stuff. If you want those things, those materialistic things, you're going to have to buy into the matrix and sell your soul and take the jab and everything else. Or you can live outside the matrix. And it might be scary. It might be kind of different, but people are already setting up systems like that. I know people in different towns that are trying to get, you know, like a precious metal backed currency for their local farmers market. I was in North Carolina recently, and well, actually a few months ago with the floods and everything. And those are some of the most resilient, off the grid people that have. I mean, they know old school medicine. They can take herbs from the mountain and heal you, and that's why. That's why FEMA hasn't really helped them as much, and I think that's why they're trying to drive those people out of the mountain. You will never drive the Appalachian people out. They are the most resilient people ever. If you want to study how to get a society back on track or how to create your own, go to the mountains of, you know, Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, and you will see the most remarkable thing ever. Just awesome communities working together and such knowledgeable people. And these people still read books still. So I think we need to kind of get back to the old ways of family, you know, reading, classic education. And I don't hope I'm not on a soapbox now either. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, that's absolutely spot on. I think one last thing that absolutely has to happen is, and it kind of goes all the way back to, you know, that phrase of when Benjamin Franklin came out of the room, and the lady asked him, you know, what kind of a government are we going to have? And he says, a republic if we can keep it. And I think part of that message was our society works because, not just because of the structure of it, but also because there's a certain moral clarity that has to exist in order for our society to actually function. And I think we're seeing that. For example, morals is what actually drives our justice system, for example, to be equal and fair across the board. And I think a lot of that you saw in the last couple of years, like the lawfare that was brought against President Trump, especially that Judge Merchan. That guy has to be one of the most corrupt people that have ever existed on a bench, because he would allow things that should have never happened. And I think all these people that are screaming and yelling, saying, "Oh yeah, President Trump's a convicted felon," well, there is zero doubt in my mind that everything about that conviction is going to be overturned. You know, once somebody that's actually moral, you know, a moral court, a court that actually has fairness in their minds, and a lady justice that's still blindfolded, they're going to throw that out. And so being a convicted felon is just it's just a trope that everybody's going to have to discard here pretty quick. But the key is being a moral society is equally important as having a system like a constitutional republic like what we have. And without it, again, the entire thing falls apart. And unfortunately, once it starts falling apart, then the amount of crime that we are going to see, the amount of inhumane acts against other people, the amount of charity is going to just plummet, because it's the more crime that's out there, the more people are forced to look inward and say, it's every man for himself. It's every family for himself. It's my responsibility as a dad and as a husband to protect my family. And if I have to provide for my family and I can't look outward and help my neighbors, then again, even the neighborhood falls apart. And then that just reverberates out and becomes a larger and larger scale until everything falls apart. And that's, I know people, hear these kind of things and they say, this is just a conspiracy. You're blowing things way out of proportion. But, we've seen the deterioration over the last few years, especially. We've seen this deterioration that I think the foundation, you can't see it on the surface as much as what's happening underneath. The foundation is just rotting. It's falling apart. And we've got to get serious, and we've got to get under there and save that foundation. And a big part of that foundation is morals, and a big part of that foundation is personal responsibility.
Absolutely. And people think you can just sit back and be an American. Being an American is a full-time job. We have to, constantly fight for our rights, and more than even just fight for rights, just stand up for what you already have. Don't be that mousy person that says nothing. Stand for something. Say something. Or else we've got, you've got everything to lose if you don't.
Yeah, 100% right. So, hey, Taylor, how can people find you and follow you? And, what platforms are you active on? Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So RGV Truth, as in Rio Grande Valley Truth, all one word. RGV Truth 1 on X, and just RGV Truth on all other platforms, which would be Facebook, Rumble, and Instagram. Mostly I update on Rumble, Facebook, and X.
Awesome. RGV Truth. And I'll put some of those links in the show notes for sure. But again, I found you on X, and I thought some of your posts on there were just absolutely spot on. And I was like, man, this is, I got to have this guy on the show to talk about this stuff. Cause again, it's a crime show. We're not trying to be political. We're not trying to, focus on, this doomsday type of scenarios. But at the same time, the amount of potentially the amount of damage and the amount of crime that we could see from what's the repercussions of what's happened over the last 4 years. And then starting Monday, by the time you're listening to this, folks, things have changed. The moment, 12:01 on the January 20th, things are going to change. And that's when President Trump will be sworn in. And from that moment forward, everything is starting to change. And we've already started seeing that. We've already started seeing people changing their attitude. Hamas all of a sudden wants peace, and, all sorts of wild stuff that's going to happen around the world, but also within the United States, things are going to change. And there's some people that don't want to change, and they are willing to go to any length to make sure that it doesn't change, regardless of what we want as the people. And so, if you are listening to this, then resolve to be part of the change. Resolve to be part of getting us back to the United States that we all know and love and we're proud of. And part of that is going to have to be, number one, you got to take responsibility for yourself and your family. And number two, reach out and make sure that other people are held to the same standard that you are. So And part of that a big thing is getting educated. And that's where people like Taylor come in mind. So again, everybody go and follow Taylor and check out everything that he's doing on all these social media. Again, RGV Truth. So Taylor, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the discussion. It's been kind of depressing, man. I was hoping you had some better stories about being down there at the Rio Grande, but I'm just kidding. But I appreciate everything you do, because as hard as it is to hear, it's all stuff that we need to hear.
Yes, sir. And maybe I can come back on and we can get into the nitty gritty of the trafficking rings down here. But yeah, it was excellent podcast, brother. Really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.